the Finish Line, a podcast on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, where every 2 weeks I will be chatting with ordinary people doing extraordinary things on their path to their own finish line. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of Beyond the Finish Line with Joe Hardin with the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. Today we have none other than Troy Meadows. Troy hosts one of my favorite podcasts, Midpacker Pod, with the Free Trail Podcast Network. He's also founder of Round Trail Life, a sustainable apparel company. Troy is a steward of the trail running community and just an overall rad dude. I can't wait to sit down with Troy for this chat. Also, feel free to submit comments, questions for Troy, and we will get to those throughout the podcast. Also, if you feel so inclined, please head to the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network and smash that follow button. There's a great community that we're building of podcasters there with some fantastic content coming your way. So without further ado, let's bring Troy on. What's up, Troy?
Hey, Joe. How you doing, man? Thanks for having me on.
Man, this is rad. So I'm so glad you're here. I guess we'll start with, tell me how to get into running. Let's start there, Troy.
Oh gosh, how I got into running. Okay, so I ran in high school my freshman and sophomore year, like cross country, did like the 800 and the mile. Fell out of love with running. I was like really into aggressive inline skating for a long time, and kind of got like, because kind of counterculture, alternative rock, like was all about like growing my hair out long and shaving up the sides and wearing big baggy jeans and plaid shirts, and just kind of like running wasn't really my thing. My dad was the running and cross country coach for the high school, and so I ended up being like, I spent 2 years being, what was it like? I ran around and filled water jugs up and did like all of the things for the team, but I didn't actually run. I will say he was a little bummed with me because he didn't start coaching, and I basically, like, the years he started coaching the team is when I stopped kind of engaging in the running in my high school. And then that kind of started it. So I was never amazing at it, but I like doing it. And, I like doing it at the time. And then fell out of love with running in my 20s and came back to it. So my mom passed away, my dog died, and I turned 30 in the same week. And it kind of opened up a whole world of like, you need to do something with your life, kind of like from a physical standpoint, like you can't just like smoke cigarettes and do nothing for the rest of your life. It's not a good look. And so, I basically quit smoking cigarettes the day I found out my mom passed away. And she died of lung cancer, never smoked a day in her life. And then got back into running and started running, and was like, I found I could just do like a 5K pretty easily. Like I just like right off the couch could run like 3 miles. I was like, okay, cool. And so yeah, that kind of started, I turned 30 and got back into running. And then what really kicked it off, I mean, honestly, I traded a very serious nicotine addiction for a dopamine addiction around running. And so that, like, I will say I have a little bit of an addictive personality. And so I got hooked pretty quickly again. And then I read this book called Born to Run, and I was like, oh, and I was training to do like a Spartan, whatever, the obstacle course race thing. And I read Born to Run. I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do this Spartan race anymore. Like, I want to run ultras. And so then that just kind of started my journey of like kind of running ultra marathons, and dealt with some dealt with like a slight meniscus tear and a knee injury early on. It took like about 2 years to clear up. And then, over about 2 or 3 years, over like 3 years or so, got myself into like ultra shape, and then ran my first ultra at Way Too Cool. Oh gosh, I should have looked at my ultra sign up before this, but that was like back in 2016, something like that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's rad. So you said you went through like the normal progression, like you did like a 5K and worked your way up to ultra, or did you just go full trail and ultras?
Yeah, well, I was always into trails. Like I have a history in ultralight backpacking, so that's what I did a lot in my 20s. And so like the idea of going like far going long on the trails, but like being very self-sufficient was something I was familiar with and capable of doing. As far as like, I didn't really race I didn't really race a 5K. I just realized like, hey, I could go out the door and run 3.3 miles. You know, it wasn't that big of a deal. And then I kind of worked myself up in distance. I think my first race that I ran prior to running an ultra after getting back into running was this race. It's a Bay Area classic on the West Coast in California. It's called Beta Breakers. And you basically run from the harbor and you run up over the city and you end up at the beach in San Francisco. So you kind of run across San Francisco. It's like an 8-mile race. And it's not really a race. It's like a big party in San Francisco. Like they block off the streets and people like throw ragers, and like it's a big thing. People wear costumes, and like it's like me and my buddy did it. And then after that, the next thing that I ran was a 50K. But I was really all about just like doing the running thing and loving doing it. And then once I read Born to Run and like learned about the community, I was started to kind of, I found out about I Run Far. I went and spectated Western States a couple years before I was even running like really long distances. And so I was like drinking the Kool-Aid, like really stout mixed Kool-Aid, like I was drinking from the fire hose. Like I was at Western States the year that Timmy Olsen broke Scott Jerick's course record. Was there the next year when Tim held off Rob Carr, and if there was another like mile in that race, Rob would have probably passed him. Like it was like about the closest the race has finished in a long time. So I always spectated it, and like I went to Robinson Flat, then I went to Michigan Bluff, then I went to Forest Hill, then I went down to the river, then I went to the finish. So I like watched the leaders. So yeah, I mean, I never really, like my father-in-law is always like, oh, you should run a marathon. You'd probably surprise yourself. I'm like, I don't want to run a marathon. I want nothing to do with running like that much distance on the roads. I do run on the roads like weekly. Most of my miles are done on the roads. And then the weekend is where I get to go explore the trails here around Asheville. So.
Oh, so that's cool. So you already had you already, into the outdoors and stuff before you started running. I've kind of gone the other way. Like I started trail running, and now, ultra running too. And now I'm hiking and stuff, like, so it's kind of cool. Like, I mean, it's kind of flip flop, but, and likewise, I still haven't ran a standard marathon either. I'm kind of afraid of running on the roads that far. I think I'd rather pick any other distance on a trail than running a standard road marathon. But
I've talked to people who have told me, like my friend qualified for Boston back in his 40s. So was like, did run a decent time to qualify, but he said he'd rather run a 50-miler than run another road marathon. That's how bad it just beat him up. And to do the work to run fast, I think was what he also referenced to. It's like, if you want to run a fast marathon, like the work you have to do to run a fast marathon is just, it punishes you. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think the worst I've ever felt was my fastest half marathon versus my first 50K. I was, back on my feet in a couple of days. My fastest PR half marathon on a road, like, just tore me up for like 3 or 4 days. But yes, I agree with that. So I kind of want to back up a little bit and tell you a bit about, my love for the Mid-Packer Pod. It's one of my favorite podcasts, man. Like,
thanks, brother.
And I just kind of want to shout you out a little bit here. When I first got into running, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't even know trail running existed. I was just absorbing everything I could find about running in general. And I found the Mid-Packer Pod, and I was like, nothing against like, podcasts that have like all the elites and all that stuff. But I was just like, oh man, like these are regular people too. I mean, it's a mixed bag, but I was just like, you can run in the woods. Like, I love being in the woods. So I started diving into the Mid-Packer Pod, and that turned me on to a lot of other podcasts and, and things like that. And then I listened to the podcast with Gandhi, and I reached out to him, and, like we talked about in the green room, fast forward January till now, I'm writing and podcasting for Run, Try, Bike. And so I guess just a shout out to the Mid-Packer Pod. It's one of my favorites, man. And just having you on this podcast, I'm like super stoked, a little nervous, But honored that you're here, man. I just, I got to say that. So,
Yeah, I would say I just appreciate that, Joe. And I'm glad I'm glad you obviously said it in the green room, but like I just had no idea. And I love like just the full circle aspect of that story. And then, for me as someone who's like creating content in the ultra running, in the trail running community and within the space, it's like, I love what I'm doing. But when I get to hear stories like that, it just like, it juices the stoke a little bit more, man, just to see that like there are circles being created within circles and then like opportunities are opening up. And like, here we are talking on your podcast, and it all kind of stemmed from one of the episodes that I created with our man Ohm. So that's pretty amazing. Yeah. Thank you.
So yeah, I guess just keep it up, man. You're creating a space and fostering a community that's growing, and it's super rad. So Midpacker Pod, I need to ask, how did it come to be? I need to know everything about the Midpacker Pod.
Yeah. So the origin story is actually kind of funny. So, I've been like, I'm not a founding member, but like I was like, Dylan and I joke, like I probably was like the second person to sign up for a subscription to what they were doing at the time, which was called Pillars. And then at the time, his podcast was called The Well. And I mean, to be honest, like I told myself, I was like, man, I got to figure out how I can be a guest on Dylan's pod, And I was like, I'm not fast. And at the time, like he brings on like elite athletes and tells their stories, which I love listening to myself, but like, I'm not that guy. I'm totally not that guy. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to plug into the community and I'm going to see what, I try to add value as much as I possibly can. And that's ultimately what happened. Like it turned from Pillars into Free Trail. They've been doing office hours for a long time. And so like every Wednesday, if you're a member of Free Trail Pro, you have access to office hours. And I missed this week, and it's like, because I have a 2-year-old son. So I was on dad duty and I just kind of spaced, honestly, that the call was going on. But, I basically have been to every single office hours that they've ever done. We have amazing conversations there. And sometimes we bring on guests. Sometimes we talk about training. Sometimes we talk about just what's going on with Free Trail. Sometimes we talk about like Western States is happening. So there's like a big push around the content that Free Trail is putting out around Western States. We talk about that. But it's really just like an open place where you can get access to Dylan, Ryan, Dylan Bowman, Ryan Thrower, and just kind of like, it's a very safe place for the community to ask questions too. And so like one day they needed someone to fill in for office hours. And I was like, yeah, I got you. Like, let's do it. I'll like pick a topic and we'll talk it up for the community. And so they gave me the Zoom call, the Zoom login. And I hosted an office hours. And at that time, like I was one of the first ones to do that. There's a couple other community members that will step in and do that as well. And they'll actually bring on guests and host guests. But it was something where like, I was like, yeah, I have no problem doing it. And the community enjoyed it. And then, obviously Dylan and Harmony appreciated having Harmony as Dylan's wife, appreciated having someone that they could kind of, that could help out in that capacity. And at the time, like I had that time slot really wide open. So I was like very excited to do that. And still am. And, but so that kind of, Dylan and I started having a conversation maybe 4 months before the pod launched. And I told him, I was like, hey man, I'm really thinking about starting a podcast. He's like, oh, you really should. I think you'd be really good at it. And then I started thinking about the idea and I was incubating in my head and I was thinking like, oh, what would it be? I was like, oh, I really want to tell, like, I already had like the idea, like I want to tell the stories of the middle of the pack. Like I don't want to tell the elite stories. I want to tell something that's like a little bit unique. And I want to highlight some of the really cool work that's going on that people are doing on and off the trails. So it's going to be a lot about talking about running because that's what we do. But like everyone is, I mean, we're all such special little snowflakes. And I say that in the best term, like we're all doing like really cool and unique things. And a lot of it wraps around our running. And I remember the week. So Joe, you asked, I'm telling the story. I remember the week that I was like, I'm going to message Dylan and see if they want to put this on the network. So that way I can have the support of the community in what I'm doing, as opposed to like going on my own. And like the next day he sends me a text message and he's like, hey bro, you still keen on producing a podcast? And I'm like, what? Like, are you reading my mind? Like, yes, let's go. So then we set up a call, we talked about it, and they're like, oh, I love this idea. And a lot of it was about like, let's highlight the community members, but let's just highlight the middle of the pack. And it was one of the things, it was a piece of feedback that kept coming back to them at Free Trail was people wanted to hear more about the middle of the pack. And so it was kind of like, it was something that like they were seeing the community wanted. And then I was already thinking about it. And then, I mean, literally it all just like came together at the perfect moment. And so, within 2 or 3 weeks of that conversation, I had kind of picked up the gear, kind of did a bunch of research, worked with Ryan Thrower, who's like the main creative at Free Trail. He really helped me like, kind of just get a little bit my feet like grounded around like what it would take to produce the pod. And then it's excuse me. And then like I produce the entire thing. So like I do the guest outreach, I edit it. Free Trail is amazing because they help me with the hosting, and I'm like kind of an idiot with the hosting because I have no idea, but I know it costs monthly to do it. And so I'm very happy that they're willing to pick up that cost. But at the end of the day, it's kind of my baby, and they let me do whatever I want, and they trust me. And I'm excited to be able to give back to them by repping Free Trail. And then ultimately I do a little, I talk about Free Trail quite a bit on the podcast, but ultimately, I mean, that's, Joe, that's how it came to be. It was kind of the very serendipitous situation of, I wanted to do it. I had a lot of free time at the time, and it was feedback that Free Trail was getting. And so they kind of leaned in and they were like, who could do this? And I was top on the list because of all the value I'd added back to the community over about a year and a half. So.
That's right. That's right. I kind of had the same moment as you. Like I saw like an email, like, hey, would you be interested in hosting a podcast? And I was just like, can't be real, right? I think I screenshotted it and like it was like, you want me to host a podcast? It's like, yeah. I was like, what? Like it's so wild, but that's fantastic, man.
And to bring it full circle, I've never been on Dylan's podcast, but it was a really cool moment for me to actually have him come on my podcast a couple weeks back. And then, and so it was kind of like one of those like moments for me where I was like, well, this is cool because I wasn't quite still have the goal, but it's almost like I've kind of fulfilled that goal by being able to have Dylan on as a guest on my podcast. So.
Yeah, that's wild. As soon as I saw that episode, I was like, all right, I gotta listen to this today. But yeah, that's rad, man. So okay, tell me about Run Free Trail too. Kind of run us through what that is.
Oh, you Run Trail Life. Yeah. So,
sorry.
Run Trail Life. Yeah. Run Trail Life is just kind of like a little side hustle I put together. I started working on it probably 2 years ago, and it's like, I do all the design. It's kind of fun stuff. It's like really about like, it's all like organic cotton blanks, and it's kind of like pays homage to ultra running, but it's not about like tech gear. It's not about like um it's not about creating, you're not gonna yeah, I guess the trucker, I'm like wearing a trucker hat. Like this thing has a really sweet sweatband in it, so you could definitely run in the trucker, but like the gear isn't meant to run in. It's the stuff that like you pull out to head to the coffee shop or head to the brewery after your run, and you throw it on, and it's like says stuff like you had me at long run, or like ultra runners do it longer. That's like one of my favorite tees. This is the shirt I'm wearing today is that mid-pack life. And I need to put this on the site. This is like the sample, and I like been wearing it for 6 months, and I've got a lot going on, Joe, but this shirt should be on the site, at this point. But it's really, yeah. So it's just like, it's something fun for me to do. It's a little bit of a passion project. And the idea is like, how do we create some stuff that people like enjoy wearing to represent their love of the trails and ultra running, and get people to kind of ask questions like, what is that? Like, what do you mean by that? Right. There's a shirt that we did. It's called like I call it European Champions, because I don't want to like shout out UTMB too much. I don't want to get a cease and desist from them. But the shirt is basically like, oh gosh, it's all the way. I should have it in front of me here, but it's all the last names of it's all the first names of all the women who have won UTMB.
Cool.
And then the last name is Jim. So it's like, I don't want to forget anybody here, but it's Chrissy, it's Nikki, it's Rory, it's Courtney, it's Katie, and then it says and Jim, and so the idea is like, it's like, the idea for that is like just to highlight, hey, like these ladies have been crushing UTMB for 20 years. And, Jim stands on their shoulders as the first male to finish the race. But it's like kind of, it's kind of an homage to just like the women in ultra running. So it's like fun designs like that. I mean, it would be really cool if I could retire on Run Trail Life money, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. But yeah, it's just something that I enjoy doing. And it's a little bit of a creative outlet for me, that and the pod itself. So, and they work together. I mean, I shout out Run Trail Life on the podcast. I'm a little like nepotistic with my sponsors right now. It's Run Trail Life and it's Free Trail. But yeah, it's just a way for me to kind of do something else for the community that's just a little bit different. It's like not tech fabric. It's not something you're going to run races in. It's something that you're going to put on when you're hobbling around after you finish your ultra or after you finish your long run, and you're going to go out on the town. So
yeah, that's rad, man. Yeah, keep making all that good stuff. It's cool stuff. Yeah, as soon as that shirt gets listed, I'll definitely have to have that.
I've gotten a lot of comments online about it, so I definitely need to put it up there. Maybe I'll carve out the time this weekend. It doesn't take it. I need 45 minutes and it's done. I just need to, it's that whole thing where it's like, man, like there's so many other things I need to do. And then, but then I'm also looking at I'm missing out on a golden opportunity here, because like everyone loves the Mid-Pack Life shirt. So I definitely got to get it on the site.
Yeah, I would definitely rep that shirt for sure. So I want to talk about your Lost Coast Trail FKT too.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I need to hear more. So wherever you want to start with that, I'm ready.
Yeah, so COVID is really what happened, right? So COVID happened and no one was doing anything. FKTs kind of became, I don't know, they came back in vogue, right? It was people went hard on the FKTs. And I started looking around. At the time I was living in Sonoma County in Petaluma, and I started looking around my area and where I could stay local. And the Lost Coast kind of came back on my radar, and it's a route that I knew about from my ultralight backpacking days. So, traditionally, this is a route you do. If you do it traditional backpacking, it takes you a week. If you do it ultralight style, you do it in 2 or 3 days. You need a permit to do the beach section. And so, there's basically a wait list and there's a lottery and there's all these things. And like people wait a long time to basically pull their permit to do Mattole to what's that road and what's that town in the middle? It'll come to me. But basically to do the beach section. The route itself, it's 27 miles of beach followed by a 50K in the mountains. And it's not just all beach running. There's about 7 miles of trail that you get up on the side of the beach. And then there's a lot of, there's not really sand. There's a lot of like really small gravel beach sections. And then there's several 100-yard sections of rocks as big as my head and bigger that you have to kind of navigate through. And so, yeah, COVID hit, it came on my radar, and I was looking at the unsupported time, and it was set by Ricky Gates and Lenore had gone out and did it several years before. And I looked at their time and I was like, it looks soft, like their time looks soft. It was like 13 hours and 40 something minutes. And I was like, it's less than 100K. Like, I'm feeling pretty fit. It only has 9,000, it's got 10,000 feet of climbing. It can't be that, just can't be that hard. And so I went out and I was in okay shape. I was training a little bit, but I wasn't very serious about it. I just kind of showed up. Um, Obviously, I was like ultra fit, and I did my research. I realized that, the beach section is impassable in 3 spots. And so you need to time your route across a low tide. And so I started looking at the tide windows, and there was going to be there's basically, it kind of undulates, and like every 4th or 5th low tide, there's like a really low tide. It just kind of like how it works out. I was like looking at the pattern, and I was like, okay, cool. Here's the day. Let's go do it. I got to start at this time. And so I went and did it. I did the beach section, got through it. And I remember getting off the beach. The spoiler alert, I had to go back again. So the first time I went, the first time I went, I remember getting off the beach. I felt good, but I remember getting off the beach section and being like, my hip flexors are toast, like just completely toast. And then you have Shelter Cove is where you run to. So you run from Atoll to Shelter Cove. And then once you get out of Shelter Cove, it's like 3,000 feet of climbing it's like 5-mile road. It's like a little over 3,000 feet of climbing on a road.
Dang.
Before you get into the Kings Range. And then, after that it's like 31 minus 5. I'm doing public math on the pod, but then you have like 26, 27 miles, something like that, through like what gets progressively more game trail, I guess would be the easiest way to say it. Like, you start on trail and it just gets more and more rugged, and it turns into like this pretty intense bushwhacking session toward the end when you get to Usul. And the route just chewed me up and spit me out. Like, the first time I went out and did it, it just like, I told my wife, because like it took it took me like 17 and a half hours to complete the route the first time. I told her, I was like, it wouldn't take me more than 15. And like, she had to drive like 7. It's like 6 or 7 hours to drive from the start to the finish. So it takes like 6 hours to drive 58 miles. You're not driving 58 miles. It's probably more like 100 miles. And then you have to come down into Usul, which is this crazy dirt road. You definitely need 4-wheel drive to get down there. But she had been waiting for me forever, like forever. And then like, it was during COVID and people were staying on the beach, and they were like, it was like a tent city. It was like a camp down there. It was like a city down there of people like living on the beach, right? Because no one's got jobs, no one's got stuff to do. And they're down there with like, this is Mendocino Coast. So like, there's a bunch of good old boys down there with machine guns, and like they were shooting off flares. And like, it was like, I remember I could hear it all because I'm up on the ridge trying to come down into Usul. And like, I spent the last 10 miles of that route. Like, I just zombie marched it to the finish. Like, it was just, the wheels just flew off. I get down, my wife finally sees me, and she's seen other backpackers coming down, and she's asking like, have you seen some stupid dude that's running this trail? And they're like, no. And when I see her, like, she's got the look on her face, man. She's like, I didn't know if she wanted to hug me or punch me. You know what I mean? Because she was so worried about me. And so and like, I had an inReach with me, so she knew I could call out if I needed help. But like, there was no way for us to communicate because there was no service, and we didn't have 2 of the devices. So I get down to the finish, like, whatever. I'm wrecked. I'm destroyed. I eat some food that she's got for me. I'm in the car, like half passed out while she's driving us back to the house. It's like a 3-hour drive home or 4-hour drive home in the middle of the night. And I remember being in the car, sitting there thinking to myself, like, when am I going back? And I didn't tell her this. I waited a couple days. And then it became my goal for the next year. Like, I literally, I did everything everything was focused around that being the A goal. Like I started at the time, like Free Trail had just launched a bunch of training plans. So I was using training plans for the first time. Before then, I was just very much a like, I'm going to run like 5 or 6 miles a day and then go long on the weekends. And like, before I get to like a race, maybe I'll do like a big back-to-back day, like back-to-back stuff, but it's like, so I started doing workouts. I was like getting super specific. So I was doing my long run. I would do these like 3-hour steady state runs with like 2 or 3 30-minute steady state sessions in between. I'd go out to the beach I was living in Petaluma. So I'd go out to Point Reyes and go out to one of the beaches there. And I would just run back and forth on this beach doing these intervals and doing these long runs on the beach, getting super specific. And that would be Saturday. And then Sunday I would get up and go long and try to just like smash as much vert as I possibly could at this local park, Sugarloaf Park in Sonoma County. And I would go run 25 miles. Right. So I'm like simulating exactly what I'm going to see at the Lost Coast. And then I thought about like where I was super inefficient, and I brought one Be-Free filter on a 500 ml flask. So I had 3 flasks and there's plenty of water on the route. But the hard part is like, I had to fill the bottle like 3 times to fill up to fill a liter. I had to fill up this 500 milliliter bottle like 2 or 3 times just to get enough water out. And then, so I learned my lesson. I ordered like a 1.5 liter soft flask. So it's like this big collapsible soft flask. And so when I would get to a water source and there's plenty of them, I would just fill that thing up. And my goal was like, my plan's like, I'll fill that thing up and then I'll just keep walking and I'll be able to filter all my water. I'll be able to put my nutrition in my water, but I'll be able to keep moving while I do it. And so I could just thought about all the things. And then, so leading into the next trip, it was about almost a year to the date. And, man, Joe, I was really freaking fit. I was ready to go. I was about as fit as I've ever been in my entire life. And I felt really, really good. And my buddy had a little Sprinter van that he was building out. So it had like a bed in it, and a little stove action. And he was like, hey, I'll drive you. I'll pick you up. His buddy had an InReach. So we had 2 devices. So I could communicate with him and then he could communicate out. And so we kind of dialed in all the logistics. And it's pretty easy logistics because like it's unsupported. So I'm carrying everything with me. All he has to do is get me there and pick me up. And then, so I did it. I ran the beach section like a half an hour faster, maybe 45 minutes faster than the year before, hit the road at Shelter Cove and ran up the entire, I like trotted up the entire thing, but I walked that entire thing the last time, the year before. And then I was marbling a groove, man, doing it. I was like the 1.5 liter soft flask worked out perfectly because it's like, it saved me. That probably saved me like 45 minutes out of the 17:30. Right. And so, yeah, so I get to the end of, I finally get to the finish and, I made it. I did it in like 14 hours and 20 some odd minutes. So I was like definitely short of I was like half hour, 45 minutes off what Ricky Gates had done. And I posted about it and Ricky was like, oh no, we took support at Shelter Cove because there's a little convenience store where you can buy water. And I think someone brought them water down at Shelter Cove. And so he reached out to the fastest known time site and was like, oh yeah, you have us labeled wrong. Like we definitely went supported. And so then like,
oh, that's cool.
Ultimately, like I just kind of fell into, so technically there was no unsupported route. So I like fell into that, but like the moral of the story is like, I worked my tail off to get like almost Ricky Gates fit when they were doing, and he says like, we took a very pedestrian pace. So I'm just like, I realized like, I own a solid 63% on Ultra Sign Up. Like I am a classic mid packer, you know what I mean? But at the time, like in that moment, like I was about as fit as I'll ever be. And that record has stood for some time. So if anyone's out there and they want to go, you have to check. 'Cause I think the trail may be closed right now. I think they're dealing, the northern section may not be passable at this moment, but I am happy to give anyone as much beta as they possibly want to go out there and have fun and take a crack at it. It is a rugged, relentless, just ridiculously hard route. I will say that it's a fun adventure. It's definitely a very fun, unsupported adventure. So
I like how something that I kind of gathered that. I like how like Ricky was like, no man, you've got it. Like I think that's kind of cool. And then it just speaks a lot to the community. And you're like, hey, like if anybody wants to try it, like I'll give you, everything I've got. I just think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and he didn't have. I mean, I happened to tag him in a Facebook post. Like I just happened to like engage with him on social media, and he was like, "Oh no, wait a minute, what's going on here? Oh no, dude, we took support." It's like
that's cool.
It's just like the honesty that exists in the community, and like he said, he didn't have to do that like at all. Like he just So it was. I'm gonna say it made my year, it made my decade. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
So
I love hearing about it. Man, Ricky Gates' Transcon documentary. I bet him 1,000 of those views. Every time I'm stuck on a treadmill, that's always in my top 5 like queue of things I watch. But yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah, definitely reach out to Troy. I'd like to. I've only ran 4 miles on sand, so I'm trying to scale this in my head right now. That's just so wild.
So pro tip: run as close to the water as humanly possible, because it's way harder there. It's like way harder there. The sand's packed in.
Oh yeah,
and like it doesn't give as much. So you're kind of that's you can kick off a decent pace, but like it slows you down a little bit. It's definitely tough, and like you don't have to go out and do it as an FKT. Like it's a route that's like worthy of an adventure. I know several people who have gone out and done it, like 3 or 4 people deep, and it's cool because as ultra runners, like as long as you plan that beach section right, like you can get it done, and you don't have to worry about the permit, and you don't have to like be beholden to like all the other backpackers are sitting there just like waiting for their turn. Like if you're fit enough and you have the experience, you can just go out there and get it done in a day. And yeah, it may turn into an 18-hour day or a 19-hour day, but like, hey, that's like the fun of it, So
that's the name. That's the beauty of the game, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's on a bucket list. Like I just want to backpack it. I think it'd be cool. If there's anything that ultra running has served for me, among the other things that it gives me, it's given me like a really strong like wanderlust. Not obviously like I love the Midwest. Like we have some hidden gems of trails in Indiana that probably half the world doesn't know about. But so I'm not missing out a lot. But my perimeter is getting bigger as I participate more in this community. Also, something I was going to talk to you about is your run coaching too. Kind of how did that start, and maybe just tell me a little bit about how that's growing too.
Yeah, so I have a really small roster. So I was between jobs for some time. Like I founded this organization with 4 of my friends. It was a company based in California. Like I had a kid, I moved back east. The company itself, the market just kind of, it was a long like spiral of slow death for this organization. And so, what happens as founders is like the first people that, if you're running a solid organization, the first people that stop getting paid are the founders. It's just kind of how it works. And then the founders are expected to work like really hard in order to keep the organization running. And that's kind of what happened. So I was like, there was like a 6-7 month period, 8-month period where like I wasn't getting paid from my organization. I was still putting in work in the organization, and I was trying to figure out like, well, what are the next steps going to be while I was putting out my resume, trying to find a new job. Turns out like serial entrepreneurs, like it's not that easy to just go get a 9-to-5, even though you have more experience than like, if you've built anything from zero to like doing millions of dollars of revenue, like it's like, man, you've done a lot. You've worn a lot of hats, and like you've had to deal with a lot of problems, and you're really good at problem solving. And so like that's just like a long way of me saying like I was in an interesting spot. I had a lot of freedom, but I was trying to figure out like what's the next step going to be, and I really wasn't getting the responses like in the job market that that I wanted. And I didn't want to have to settle for something that I was going to hate doing. And so, I was looking at the USCA certification, and I was thinking about like, what could I do in the space? And I was doing the podcast, trying to grow the audience, ultimately kind of the goal was like, how do I monetize the podcast? How do I put more work into Run Trail Life? How do I create some diversified revenue streams? And then like coaching kind of just made sense. Right. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I am definitely like a student of the game. Like I love the sport. And I was also like intrigued in that certification as a way of just like making my own training better too, was another, like, it was kind of an unintended selfish consequence of kind of taking it. And I was looking at the price point and I was like, oh, it's not that expensive. And I told myself, I was like, man, even if, you only get a couple of athletes, like the certificate will pay for itself very, very quickly. And then, so I got the certificate, put myself out there. I still have a couple spots open, but what happened was I ended up like connecting with a good friend of mine who's building an organization, and I had an opportunity that was like too good to say no to. So I ended up getting like, I guess it's not a 9 to 5, but I ended up getting like a real job. I was like, oh my gosh, like this would be the first time in 20 years that I haven't worked for myself and either building something myself or doing something, doing projects on my own. And so, I started working for his company, and then, that's when like, I was like, okay, like I just need to kind of hold the line here at just a handful of athletes or less, because I just don't have the time for it now. Cause now I have like a 40-50 hour commitment with the job. I have like a 3 to 5 hour commitment with the podcast a week. And then, a handful of athletes will like keep me way busy. That being said, like, if anyone is looking for some mid-pack coaching, I definitely have room for a couple, one or two more athletes, but, my approach is very much, I like doing interval work. I've been a big fan of it. I've seen it work really well for me, but I also come from like a mid-packer, mentality as someone who's raced a lot of ultras, ran a lot of ultras, done a lot of experiences from the FKT standpoint, also have like a big background in ultralight backpacking. So for me, it's about like, how do we get people like ready to tackle their ultra goals, and I'm 40 something, I'll be 44. I'll be 44 next month.
It's weird to say, isn't it?
And so, yeah, I know. And so I started like incorporating a lot of strength training. I do PT in the evening 3 days a week. I do strength training twice a week. Like sometimes I do a little more PT than that. But at minimum, I try to do like core and PT work 3-4 days a week. And then I try to hit the weights, lift something heavy 2 days a week. And usually that's at night when the kid goes to bed. And then in the morning is when I get my running in. And so like, for me, it's about like, how do we create something that's a little bit holistic for a runner? And like, I'm just thinking of like people that are kind of in my age demographic, you're a middle of the pack runner, you're not young anymore. And so you're looking to like how, you don't necessarily need to be coached by the tip of the spear. You need to be coached by someone who's got the experience you're looking for. And that's kind of what I bring to the table as far as like having like a mid-pack mentality with my coaching, but also coming at it from a very scientific standpoint. And that's something like I definitely geek out on the research. I geek out on the data. But for me, it's about like, how are you showing up every day to be like the best version of yourself that happens to be an ultra runner? That's kind of how I look at it from a running perspective. And yeah, it's fun because everyone's different. Everyone's like a little bit of I said it before, like, everyone is very unique in what their needs are, even though we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. So
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I'm honestly just curious for myself because I'm kind of on the fence. Like, I keep looking at getting the certification, and same thing. I work a 9 to 5. I also have a side business that's unrelated to running. So I've kind of been like dabbling in like, should I get the certification? Because kind of like what you said, I'd like to come at it with runners like me who are like newer. We're not spring chickens anymore. We're not really
sure.
trying to podium or anything. Like some of us just want to and finish healthy. So, I like that you kind of threw out strength training. That's something that keeps coming up a lot because, I promote strength training. It's like, if I don't get my weekly mileage in, be damned, I'll at least get my strength training sessions in, regardless of what I stack up for the week. But so
I would say if you're self-coach and you're looking to kind of take your understanding of endurance physiology, endurance coaching, like to the next level, like it's definitely it's a good starting point. I found that, like, because of a lot of my experience and my desire to learn, like a lot of it was stuff that I already knew, but then it's also nice to be able, I mean, if you're going to coach people, it's like really nice to I hate to be like, it's good to have a diploma, right? But at the same time, like, it's very nice to be able to have a certificate and say, hey, like, it shows people that you are willing to like dedicate time and energy into learning something. And then that pays off with like creating a little bit of credibility. That being said, I think my next step is going to be to get some sort of strength training certification. I don't have a certificate for strength training, but I spent a lot of time with physical therapists, and I do not have a problem like offloading that aspect of the programming to like a professional, or at least having someone go talk to a professional to say like, hey, let's get your form dialed in. But like these, like, I can prescribe because I'm like, hey, this is the single leg stuff that you need to do, and then this is the heavy stuff you need to do, and if you want to do full body stuff, like, we can work all that in too. And but at the end of the day, like, the thing about remote coaching that's really tough is like, it's really easy to prescribe workouts. It's really like running workouts. It's really easy to say, hey, go do these like VO2 max intervals. Here's the rest, here's the work. This is what it needs to feel like, like, if you don't feel like you want to stop with 30 minutes to go, you're not running hard enough. 30 seconds to go, you're not running hard enough. Like, it's really easy to like dial in how that feels, especially for someone who's intuitive with their running. I think with the strength stuff, it's like, you want to make sure that you have really, really good form when you're doing it. It's not as impactful if you're doing lighter weight, but if you're trying to like pick up heavier and heavier stuff, form is like super, super, super important. So
yeah, that's something I'm working on. I'm working on like actually lifting heavy. Like, I do a lot of single leg stuff and like training and core work, but so I'm definitely like kind of working my way up to lifting heavy too. Certain days, but
yeah.
yeah.
RDL, Romanian deadlifts for life,
Man,
bro. Like,
dude.
I can't. They love them. Bulgarian split squats, Romanian deadlifts, like, love all that stuff. So
I always say if it starts with an Eastern Bloc name, then you need to do plenty of
them. Yeah, you should do more of them. Yeah, 100%.
Well, so I got to ask, because you're an entrepreneur, you work, family, kid. You said you have a kiddo, two-year-old.
Yeah, he's 2. A little over 2.
Yeah, a little over 2. Man, they're getting fun then, right? I've got 2 as well. I've got a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old. But you host this amazing podcast. You do a lot of stuff, man. You wear a ton of hats. How do you balance it all?
This is the balance question. I know this question. I
I
asked this question on the pod. Yeah. I mean, so I learned when I was building my last business, and like in the beginning, for the first 2 years, like, there were 80-hour weeks, like I was putting, this is before I had a kid. I put my life into that business. Like, I was burning it hard on both ends. Like, both ends of the candle were lit constantly. But one thing I learned is that there's always going to be fire. There's always going to be a fire to put out. So it's okay to go to bed with problems that are happening in the organization, right? There's always going to be something that has to be done, right? And the other thing I learned is that, like, if you don't prioritize you first, there won't be time later for you. So that's where, the morning is me. Like, I get up in the morning. I try to wake up before the kid wakes up. My wife, we both work remote, but my wife is a lot more flexible in the mornings. And so, like, she'll take on the morning responsibilities for the kiddo. I try to get out the door and get my run in. A lot of times, like, I'm home to eat breakfast with them, right? But that's just like where the schedule is. And then the evenings after the kid goes to bed, and like right now, my wife and I, because then I'll watch the kid in the afternoon for a couple hours. She'll do some work, and then once the kid goes to bed, I am doing the PT and the strength work that I want to do, or I'm actually working on the pod, and then she'll be doing her work. So we're kind of like okay with not really having, I have to say like lives, but like our lives are revolved around the work that we're doing in our family. And that's kind of what's really important. And so, in the evening, it's a lot. If I have the time, that's when I do all my strength work. And then, I used to have a lot more time to work on the pod, but usually like I schedule interviews for the pod in later afternoon between work hours and then dinner hours. And that's when I'll get in the hour and a half, 2 hour interview sessions. And then I do all my recording I do all my editing at this point in the evening. And so it's just kind of, it's a lot, to be honest with you, but I really enjoy it. And I think, I've like, I have a flexible schedule with my work too, as someone like I own the department that I work in. And so like, I definitely have like a very flexible schedule there. And it's very much like, it's a little bit more of a performance oriented position. So like, they don't really care how the sausage is made as long as it's getting made, So I can definitely like leverage a little bit of like what would be your traditional like work hours to do other things. Mainly that's just like help the wife out and watch the kiddo. And at some point we're going to bring in a little bit of childcare help in the afternoon. And once that happens, I think things are going to get a little bit easier for both of us. But that's, you say balance, and like I think the question that I ask it a lot, and the answer that I've heard more often than not is like it doesn't really exist, because like what I really am sacrificing right now is like I don't have a social life, but I don't really want a social life, because like between my wife, the work that I'm doing in the community with the pod, which is like very much remote, and then like getting out, I'm a very much a lone wolf when it comes to training. And then I have a couple people that I know that I'll go run with, and so we'll link up and get some runs in. But like I'm okay with, at this point in my life, not necessarily having to hang out with the friend group constantly. And then I have, like I said, I have a 2-year-old, so it's like they're very hands-on,
Yeah.
So you said yours are 12 and 16. You're at the handout, like, yeah, can I get $20, Dad? I need to go do this stage
That's
of
all.
the life. So
That's all I am right now. It's fine.
Yeah. But yeah, the balance question, I mean, it's kind of funny because to have the question turned on me, I'm like, huh. Yeah. I mean, honestly, like you just you do everything okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you don't do anything. No, there's very little that's done exceptionally at this point. So like even like the running this year has been good, but it hasn't. I mean, it's been good. Like I'm no complaints, but like I got to do the races I wanted to do, and my season is kind of over now. I'm just like in it I'm just running to have fun with it. All my goals have been met, but like like I'm not in the best shape I've ever been in, but I'm in good shape because I prioritize that quite a bit. Like I prioritize me, like I said, like I'm going to get my run in the morning because, all work and no play makes Troy a dull boy. And running just makes me a better person, to be honest, to be around, to be honest. And then, as far as like everything, and then as far as everything else goes, like, I think I've missed like 1 week of putting out the pod in, we're going on almost a year now. So it's like I've been able to make it happen, but sometimes I'm up till midnight, like editing the pod, because that's just like the time I have is from 9:00, and it just like something happens and it takes a little bit longer. It always takes a little bit. Nothing, nothing ever goes completely smoothly with technology, and so you just kind of like bite through it and then get it done. That's only like usually a night out of that's a night out of the week, and that happens. And then like I said, I have a really small roster. So, when you only have, like right now, I have a couple athletes. And so it's like, that's only a couple hours a week out of my time. And I enjoy engaging with them as well. And so like, that doesn't take a lot of my time. And then to be honest, the one thing that I probably don't do enough on, we kind of mentioned it earlier, is like run trail life. It just kind of, I got it up and running and it does its thing. but I've put like very, very, very little work into it the last 6 months because I just haven't had the time to do it. And it's one of those things where I'm like, oh man, if I had like just a little bit more time, and I could probably see a lot come out of that work. But that's that like next, I don't want to say next season, but that's like the next season of my life is like to dedicate some more of that work. Like maybe if I could actually monetize the pod in a significant way, I could hire out, that like I've always said, like, as opposed to putting that money in my pocket, like I'll probably like hire someone to do the social media, and then I'll hire someone to do the editing. So all I have to do is show up and do like what we're doing right now, which is the really, really fun part. And that'll give me back, a couple hours of my week that I could put back, and I can then throw those hours into Run Trail Life. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, great, man. Yeah, I'll be glad to see that growth. You're on something good there. Like, it's good stuff, for sure. These things. So is there anything you want to shout out to? Anything you're working on right now? Anything exciting coming up? Races, projects?
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, so there's a project I'm working on right now with the pod that I'll definitely talk about. But before I do that, I just finished Laurel Highlands. And if anyone listening has not ran in Rocksylvania, which is Pennsylvania, for anyone that doesn't know, man, this race is it's a must run event. This was the 45th year, I think they've ran this race.
Oh, wow.
It's on a long trail up in Pennsylvania. So it's a 70.5 mile route. It's 70.5 miles because that's how long the trail is. They put up like maybe 20 course markings, and it's only, you kind of run through the ski resort. They kind of flag the descent that you go down to connect the trail on the ski resort. But like, other than that, you're just following yellow blazes on trees the entire time. And it's an amazing run event. And it's a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed myself. It's like very grassroots. It's got like that old school ultra feel, ultra vibe. And it was like a really, really good time. It's also a Western States qualifier. It happens to be the shortest Western State qualifier on the East Coast that's not put on by UTMB and not named Hellgate. And no disrespect to Dave Horton, because he is the man, but Hellgate is really difficult to get into. So I wasn't going to put all my eggs in that basket. And I ran Grindstone 100 miler last year, and I just didn't want to go back to the event. I wanted to kind of give something else. I wanted to give something else some time. And then the last thing I want to shout out is something I'm doing on the pod. It's called Revisiting Unbreakable. And so what we've done is I've got, it's a mini series on the pod. It's like we're dropping episodes like in the weeks leading up to Western States. We just dropped episode 002. The first episode was with JB Benna, who is the creator and producer of the movie Unbreakable. The most recent episode we just dropped is with Hal Corner, who's a legend of the sport and ran and he was a star of the movie. And spoiler alert, he lost. But we had him on the pod too. He lost that year. If you've never seen the film, and like, if you've never seen the film Unbreakable, like, you just go watch it. It's free on YouTube.
Must watch.
Yeah, it's must watch, ultra fodder. And then the third episode is going to be with Dylan Bowman, and he represents that future generation that came up after the movie was dropped, and like it really helped to like it had a real impact on him and his career. And so it was like really cool project to do with a good friend of mine, Matt Van Delsen, who comes on and kind of helps me out doing co-hosting on the pod from time to time. And it was his brainchild. He like came up with the idea, did all the outreach, got the guests lined up, and it was like kind of cool because like, Joe, all I had to do was like show up and hit record and hang out. I mean, I had to edit the episodes, but I didn't have to like wrangle the guests, which is always really nice. So, but it's been really fun to do that. And I've really appreciated doing this project, this little mini series, as like, it's just like leading up the Western States to be able to like give back to that part of the community and like then put some shine. Like it's been 14 years since Unbreakable, since the 2010 Western States race. And to be able to like get JB Bennett out of hiding and talk to him for a little bit, and then get a chance to have Hal on the podcast. It was a cool way for me to bring like an elite fast guy on the pod that but not have to talk about like him as a runner. Like we talked about him as a runner, but it was just like a really cool opportunity. And then the episode with Dylan, which comes out next week, is amazing because like it felt like three ultra nerds like just completely ultra nerding out on the film and that time in the sport. So that's what I'll shout out. And then also like obviously the Mid-Packer Pod. So
listen, man,
if you're not listening to the Mid-Packer Pod, you're like been under a rock or something, so like come check it out.
Yeah, you gotta get on this level, man. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. Shout out to the Mid-Packer Pod. Man, it's been great having you here, Troy. I'm so thankful that you grace the presence of the show, and it's been great talking with you, man.
Yeah, Joe, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for reaching out, and I love like as someone who has to sit behind the mic and ask the questions, it's been really cool to be on the other side of the mic and get to tell a little bit of my story, which I rarely get to do. So I definitely appreciate the opportunity.
Cool, man. I'm glad I could give you that experience. All right. Well, that wraps up the show. And thank you, everybody. And thank you, Troy. And happy trails.
Yep. Happy trails.